All right, we're gonna record this and we're gonna see. Yes.
So it should be the one on the right.
On the right.
The
This
second
one?
tab. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So does this line cross your y-axis?
No.
So what happened to the y-intercept?
Doesn't exist?
Yes, does not exist. You're correct. Because this line does not cross on the y-intercept, so it does not exist. Yep. So don't forget that if you have a vertical line, your slope does not exist, your y-intercept does not exist. Now let's go on to the 20-something that you mentioned just now. 26 and 27, right?
Yes.
All right, so we're gonna start with the class today with this question. I'm gonna do 27. It's the same as 26 because 27 is a bit hard. It's a fraction, so I will do it. I will do it here. All right. So if you do have questions, let me know. Then I can know what's going on and I can help you guys with. So this question number 27 is asking us to use the intercept form, which is given us by this formula. You need to, given that A in this case, the A0 and 0B is your X and your Y intercept, and AB is where you put your X and Y intercept. So this question is asking us, is my X intercept is 3, 7, and my Y-intercept is -3. So that means that my A in this case will be 3/7. And my B in this case will be -3. So what do I do here is I just plug this into this equation, okay? The formula given. Your X and Y is still X and Y. So in this case, you will get X over by 3/7 plus Y over by B in this case is -3, and this is equals to 1. Okay, so so what you're gonna do next here is I'm gonna meet everyone here. So what we're gonna do here is we have to simplify this now. So what happens is when you guys got yourself a fraction like this, again, I'm doing your homework here. This is question 27 on 2.1. So what you do is because it's given us A is 3, 7, so I put 3, 7 over here, and -3 I put over there. So I don't know you guys remember a fraction. So if you have X that is divided by 1/3, you can change the division to become multiplication, and then you flip the 1/3 to become 3/1. Remember that we did last time? Okay.
Yeah.
Don't do present yet. I'm not taking attendance yet. Don't hold on to your presents. Okay. Wait. Still wait on that. I haven't. I will tell you when you guys take attendance. Okay. Hold on to your presents. So what we do here is we do the same thing. Is we change the division here to become multiplication. Okay. But I will switch the 3, 7 become 7/3 because you had to change it. This one, because you got 1, the Y here is positive, the X denominator is negative. So when you divide a positive and negative, you get negative. So you will get -y/3 equals 1. So this, when you multiply, you will get 7x/3, because x times 7 is 7x, 3. Y/3 and equals to 1. I think they wanted, let me see what form. Use the find the general form of the equation. So this question wants us in a general form. What is general form? General form means GF. General form means that AX plus BY plus C is equals to 0. This is the general form, means that everything has to be moved to the other side. So the good news here is because they this has the same denominator, they all have 3. So what do I do here is the LCD here is 3 because they all have 3 here. So I multiply everything by 3. So when I multiply everything here by 3, I will get 7x here because the 3 is gone, minus y, the 3 is gone, but the 1 will become 3. This is not general form yet because general form needs must be equal to 0. So what do? Is I move the 3 over. So I will get 7x minus y minus 3 equals to 0. So that is my answer in this case. So my answer is 7x minus y minus 3 equals to 0. So 7x minus y minus 3 equals to 0. So this is how we do this. And don't forget, they want your answer in general form, and that is the general form in this case. Okay. You okay with that one? So that's the answer. Yep, that's the correct answer.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Anyone have any questions for me beside these 2 questions? All right, and I will do one on 2.2. I know someone asked me question 10 on 2.2. I will do it. We still haven't started 2.2 yet, so we're going to start 2.2 now. All right, so we're going to start our class today with 2.2. So we're talking about functions. Functions is actually what we call as a relation between 2 set A and set B. What is the real definition of function is set A has exactly 1 element in set B. Okay, so set A is usually, we call it as a domain or the inputs. Set B is what we call as a range of the outputs. Okay, so there are 4 types of characteristic that we can talk about function. One, each element in A has to be matched with an element in B. So this one looks exactly like this picture. So if you look at this picture, every X has 1 Y. Oh, no, sorry, wrong picture. Should be something. Let me draw the arrow. The arrow should be drawn this way. So it should be one on one. Okay. So in other words, for this characteristic is telling us that it has to be 1 on 1. We call it 1 on 1. So 1 on 1 means that every X has 1 Y. Okay. And then a function is also some elements B may not match with an element in A. So for example, with this one, this is the correct one that I'm talking about is as long as this one has the same Y, this also has the same Y. So this is still considered a function. Okay. What is considered not a function? Not a function is this. This is not a function case where you got 2 and it is matched with 2 of those. Okay, so once you find out that a domain has 2 range here, then you get yourself not a function in this case. So this is a what we call as function. There are 4 ways to represent functions verbally. Verbally means that writing. For example, I can say that every student's birthday month. So every student's birthday month. So in this case, this is going to be a function. So why I say this is a function in this case is because you only have 1 birthday month, right? For example, if I pick Josh, maybe Josh's birthday is in June, right? You only got 1 birthday month. You cannot, you say, oh, my birthday falls in June and August. Then everyone will look at you, right? So this is considered a function is because every X has 1 Y. Every student has 1 birthday month. But what happens if I change it around that every month, so I change it around that every month, every birthday month, a student, no, if I, so let's say that for this case, let me put things easier here. So your X in this case is students, and Y in this case is your month, January, February. But if I interchange this to become, if X in this case is months and Y in this case is student, then this is not a function. And the reason why I say when I change this, all your X is months and Y is your students, this is not a function, is because how many of you born in January? Is that one student or is that a lot of students? Since we know that some of you born in January, so we find out that this is not a function because in January, I got Josh, I got Elijah, I got Ameka. Let's say that 3 of you born in January. So that's why this is not a function. But if I ask you students and a month, then this is a function. So you need to watch out what is your X and what is your Y in this case is. So this is called a verbal by the sentence. You'll figure out, I will give some examples. Numerically, tables, numerically mean tables like this. So you can do it like just doing a what we call as like a Venn diagram type, X and Y. So we can also figure out is this a function or not by looking at the arrows, okay? Graphically is using points. How do we figure out using graphically that is a function? It's very easy. You do one test, and that test is called a vertical line test. Some of you heard that before. So what you draw is you draw a vertical line. If your vertical line crosses the graph on one time, then it is a function, okay? And then the last thing is algebraically. So how do we know it's algebraically? Is you plug in X number. So any X number that you plug in, if you only got one Y answer, is considered a function. If you got 2 Y answer, then it's not a function. For example, it's like 4x, Y equals to 4x plus 2 is a function, because if you plug X any number you want, like 1, you get 6. You only got one Y answer, okay? So that's why this is considered a function. Things that is not considered a function is when you try to take a square root and then you got a plus minus, then you got 2 answers, then not a function. Absolute value is also one of them. So there are few that is not a function equation. Absolute value is one of them, because every time when you take an absolute value, you got 2 answers. One is positive, one is negative. So that makes him not a function. Okay, so this is mostly some of the equation you will figure out. I will show it to you how to do that. We got some examples. Okay, just right underneath there. Function notations, we use the symbol f of x. Okay, so this is a major one. F stands for the function, x stands for the variable. We call it f of x. And just want to point out to you that f of x is the same thing as y equals. So like here, we know y equals to 4x plus 2 is a function. I can change that y to become f of x. So the new function is f of x equals to 4x plus 2. So what I want to point out to you guys is read the question carefully. If I use the y equals to 4x plus 2, I call that as an equation. And if I change it to f of x equals to 4x plus 2, I will call that as a function. So sometimes when you do my homework or my test, something else, things, read the instruction, because instructions sometimes say write the equation down. Since the question asks you to write the equation down, you have to use the y instead of f of x. And sometimes the question wants you to write the function out. So if a question asks you to write a function out, you cannot use the y, you can use the word f of x. Besides f of x, you can use g of x, h of x, anything of x. Okay, usually we should use, so anything with that, with the, we call functions in this case. And then what is a piecewise function? A piecewise function is where you have 2 or more equations on a specific domain. So for example, is if I give you something like this, f of x, 3x, and 5, and this is what we call as a specific domain, or I call it restricted domain, is that this 3x can only take from x less than 5, and this 5 can only take from x is greater than or equals to 5. So that means from one part of domain, it goes to 3x. The other part of domain, it goes to the function of 5. So if you want to graph it at 5 here, this is a 5. The line that goes over on this side is 3x. Okay, the line that goes on here is 3x. So usually when you draw y equals to 3x, the line goes all the way like that. but we do not take anything above 5 is because its domain specifically say it should be less than 5. So that's why it is going this way. And you notice that the circle here is a not an open circle. It's because there's no equal to. And then for 5 is a horizontal line, and this is a closed circle going 5. And usually when you do y equals to 5, it's a horizontal line that goes all the way. But this horizontal line only starts from 5 to infinity. Is because your domain is been restricted from 5 to more bigger than 5. And you also notice that this circle is colored or closed. Is because there's an equal sign. So usually this is what we call as a piecewise function where you have to draw it out. Okay. Domain. This is very, very important. So if you guys are, this is the one that you have to really watch out, domain. So domain is where the real numbers are defined. Okay. For example, is if you have a rational function, this is called rational function, means fraction. This is important is because your denominator cannot be 0. Okay, you cannot do division by 0. So in this case, what is your domain if you have a rational fraction here? Is all real numbers except 2. And how do we figure out 2? Is you solve the equation in the denominator. So you put x minus 2 equals to 0. You get x equals to 2 here. So that's the reason why that your domain in this case is all real numbers. So this big symbol R like this is called all real numbers. Okay. So what does that mean? That it means that if you look at the number line, everything works except for 2 doesn't work in this case. Do I care about your numerator? No, I don't care about what is in your numerator. I only care about your denominator for if you have a fraction like this. Another thing is square root. So if you have a square root, then we need to worry about negative number. This is for square root. Why we cannot have a negative number on the square root is because it becomes complex or undefined. So we want to make it positive or 0. So how do you find the domain if you have a square root? Is you make it greater or equals to 0. So you take the radicand, the one inside the square root, and make it greater than or equals to 0. And you solve for x. So x in this case is greater than or equals to 4. So that means that 4 to infinity is your domain. So a lot of students ask me what kind of ways can you write your domain? If you give me x is greater than or equals to 4 or the other way 4 to infinity, I'll still take it. All your numbers except 2, I also take it. So as long as you write something that is understandable, I will take your answer. But watch out for your online homework because they're picky with the answer in this case. And then if you have square of x minus 4 over x minus 2, for this case, your domain is 4 to infinity. The reason why it's 4 to infinity is first because your domain for the top one is anything above 4. And the domain for the bottom one is x cannot be equals to 2. So if you look at the number line that you draw here, just imagine that you have a number line. The number line says that you can go from 4 and above, but cannot include 2. But 2 is not in the 4 above 4. So that's why your domain in this case is 4 to infinity. So imagine that this is your number line here. This is 4, and then 5, 6, 7, and then this is 2 over here. So this question says, this function says that 4 and above, so anything above 4, and then this bottom part says you cannot have 2. Okay, so so in this case, since you cannot have 2 here, but you can have all the numbers. So all the numbers from 4 and up, so that means your domain here is 4 to infinity. Okay, but what happens if you have this case? So this case, we still have the same domain of 4 above, but in this case, x cannot equals to 6. Okay, at this case, x cannot equals to 6 because you cannot have a 0 in your denominator. So what happens in this case is that, so if you look at this on the number line, it says that 4, 5, 6, 7, anything above that, and you cannot have 6. You cannot have 6. So this domain is 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. So in this case, your domain will go from 4 to 6, and then 6 to infinity because your 6 is not included. And we will use a parenthesis here instead of a bracket to symbolize 6 is not included. So this is how you figure out your domain for a function. So make sure you guys know this really important, and you will be asked from now on till the end of class. Okay. And lastly, we have to talk about is difference of quotient. This difference of quotient you use in calculus class. This is the difference of quotient here. This is a formula. You do not need to memorize this formula. This formula is given in the question, so do not memorize this. Okay. So it is given in your form in a test too. If it's test, I give you this formula, but you need to know how to apply it. So I'm going to teach you today how to apply this formula, and there's questions right below that I will teach you how to do it. Okay, so do not memorize that. So this question is asking us is either this is a function or not. Question 1 is not a function. The reason why is because -1 shares 2 ranges here. So this is not a function. Do you guys have any questions before I move on to the next page here? Anyone have any questions with functions here? Because this is a very important chapter or section. Anyone have any questions? Right. Next, I give you equations and you have to figure out if this is a function or not. So for question 2, I give you this. This is a hard way to do it, so I wouldn't recommend you to do it this way because it's too much work. I won't recommend you to do this. I'll recommend this way. Can someone give me any x numbers you want? Anyone wants to give me an x value? Any x value you want?
7.
7. Okay. So what we do is we just plug 7 into this equation. 7 minus 2 to the power of 2 plus y squared, because we doesn't know what y, equals to 4. And you try to solve for y. So we know that 7 minus 2 is 5, right? And 5 squared is 25. So 25 plus y squared equals to 4. And then we minus 25 over there. So y squared in this case is going to be 4 minus 25, which in this case is -21. So this one is no good because it's undefined. So let's pick something smaller. Let's take like 1. Okay, 1 is a bit better because it's smaller. Because it's a circle, 7 is way out. So if I put 1 over here, -1 squared is 1. I just want to show it to you what happens. And then when you take 4 minus 1 is 3, right? But what happens is we still have the square here. So in order for us to get rid of the square, we square root both sides, right? We will square root both sides here. And when you square root both sides, you have to have a plus and minus. So what happens in this case is y in this case will be plus and minus of square root of 3. So this gives me 2 answers. And since it's 2 answers, this is not a function. Don't forget, function says that if you plug in x, you can only have 1 answer on your y. And since this one has a plus and minuses, so it's no good. Okay. We do the same thing on question 3 here is we plug in a number. Again, I use 1. Try to use a smaller number so that it's easy for you to plug in. So you get y equals to square root of 16 minus 1, which in this case is 15, right? 16 minus 1 is 15. So square of 15, you only have 1 answer. So that means this is a function. So this is how you figure out. You do not need to do what I just did over here. Ignore this is all wrong here. This is the correct one that I'm doing. This is for question 3. So this is for so this is a function. This is not a function. Okay. And how do we know it? Is plug any number you want to your x. And if you got 2 answers or more than 2 answers, it's not a function. If you have only 1 answer, you got a function. Okay. Next is evaluating, means you plug in numbers. So, so if you have H2, means you plug that 2 into the T in this case, okay? So what we're gonna concentrate here is this question on your homework. Yes, this is question on your homework. Someone asked me this question on 2.2, question 10. So we will do this again together. How do we evaluate that? Well, we wait for that. So, no, 2.2. Yeah, this is going to take some time. There you go. So 2.2 on question 10. Oh, this thing's popping up on my windows. So this is a question that, sorry about that, something will pop out in my windows. I press the wrong button. So, so this question will ask you for question 10. Okay, so this asking us to evaluate this x plus 3 plus 2. So in this case, f of negative 3. So how do we do this is you substitute your x to become 3. So you will get square root of negative 3, in this case, plus 3 plus 2. Okay. So negative 3 plus 3 is 0. So square root of 0 is 0. So this is 0 plus 2. So this is exactly is 2. Okay. So for this answer, your answer will be 2 here. Okay. Next, we will have 1. So F1. So F of 1 means you plug in 1 inside there. 1 plus 3 plus 2. So square 1 plus 3 is 4. Square root of 4 is 2. So 2 plus 2 in this case is 4. So this will give us 4. But the last one is the trickiest one because this is no longer a number. This is x minus 3, the variable. So for this case, what we need to do here is taking square root of x plus 3 plus 2. So this x that we have on the original equation here will be replaced by x minus 3. And as you guys know that, minus 3 and plus 3 will give us 0. So this gives us square root of x plus 2. So when you have a variable like a expression of x minus 3 like that, you plug x minus 3 back into your x, like substitute, and you guys will get a 0 in this case. So sorry about that. I need to shut this down, my antivirus. So in this case, you will get square root of x plus 2. And how do you get a square root out? Is you use the side button here. There's a square root x, and then you do plus 2. So this is how you do this kind of questions. So if I ask you for a weird kind of weird type of stuff like x minus 3, then make sure that you plug in the x to become x minus 3. So it's kind of like a substitution piece in this case. Okay, so back to these questions that we have here is like example in this case is like x minus 8. I substitute the x to become x minus 8, and the 8 and the plus 8 will cancel. So you will get root x plus 2, the same thing kind of what we did here. 6 is a very tricky one because why I say 6 is a tricky one is because of absolute value. So, so what I need to point out, let's do something more difficult than 6. Let's do this question. I think I got one online homework. Let me see. I think I assigned one of them. So you guys can see. There you go. So 12, question 12. Okay. So the first question is asking us to do F3. So F3 is easy. It's because you just put in absolute value of 3 divided by 3. So this will give me 1 because 3 minus over 3, so you get 1 here. Next is negative 3. So for us to do this, f of negative 3, so you will get absolute value of negative 3 divided by negative 3. Now, since f of negative 3 is 3, negative 3 is still negative 3, this gives me negative 1. So for f of negative 3, this is negative 1. Now, as you guys know that if I put any number here, 4, you will still end up with 1. But if I put a negative number like 4, negative 4, you will end up with a negative 1. So your answer in this case is either always a positive 1 or a negative 1. So the next question we have is x minus 2. Okay, so what happens when you put x minus 2 in this case? You will get absolute value of x minus 2 divided by x minus 2. This is something difficult, and you guys will ask me that, I know. So in this case, how do we do this is, first you have to figure out what sign should we use here. So we can figure out x here cannot be 2. The reason why x cannot be 2 in this case is because when you put 2 in here, you make your denominator 0. So this 2 is where you put in here. Okay, this 2, because of a restriction domain, you cannot have 2. So it can be less than 2 or more than 2. Now let's see that if you want to take something that is less than 2. So if it's less than 2, let's take 1. 1 is less than 2, right? So put it into the function. You find out that you will get f of 1 minus 2 in this case is going to be absolute value of 1 minus 2 over by 1 minus 2. Now the absolute value of 1 minus 2 is negative 1, but if you take an absolute value, it's 1. And then if you divide 1 minus 2, 1 minus 2 is negative 1, you find out that this is negative 1. So this answer, if you put less than, is always negative 1. Something like same thing with part B that we just did over there. If you have anything that is greater than 2, example is if you want to pick 3, can someone tell me what you think your answer will be for this case? Anyone know what happens when I change your x to become 3? This one always give me negative 1. So what happens to when I put a 3 in here? Anyone know what I get?
Positive 1.
Positive 1, you're correct. You will get a positive 1. So in this case, yep. Okay. So this is how you do this question. This is a very difficult question, number 12 here that I'm showing you to you. So make sure that you understand where these 2 come from. It comes from the x minus 2 here. And usually if you have a greater sign, it's always positive because it's positive number. If you have a less than symbol, it's always a negative 1. So this is what I can tell you with this question 12, which is the same question as number 6 here. Okay. Question 7 is where you will have what we call as a piecewise function. So this question looks something like number 13. Okay, it's where if you want to find f of negative 4, then you have to figure out 13. Sorry, question 13. So you have to figure out if you have the first question A is asking us to do negative 4, you have to pick which function you have to choose for this case, and it all depends on the domain here. So which one of these is less than negative 1, or is negative 4 is less than negative 1, or negative 4 is greater than negative 1? Is the first one or the second one? Negative 4 is less than or greater than
Second one.
The
Second one.
No, the first one, because -4 is less. The bigger the negative number, the smaller it is. So it's the first one. So since it's the first one, then you just need to plug into the first one. Okay, it's the first one, sorry. It's the first one, so you just plug in. So -3 times -4 minus 3. Oops. -3 times -4 minus 3, which will give us what? 12 minus 3, 9, right? 12 minus 3 is 9. So this will give me 9. Now, what do you think about -1? Is -1 is less than -1, or -1 is less than or equals to -1? So which one is the correct here? Number 1 or the second, the first one or the second one? Anyone? So this is the second one, yes. So in this case, we only do the second one. So we will, for part B, you just plug -1 in there. So -1 squared plus 2 times -1 minus 1, and then you figure out what number is that, and that you put it over here. You guys with me here with this? It's not that tough. You just need to watch what number you have, and then look at this domain, and like 1. Is 1 less than -1, or 1 is greater than -1? First or second for part C? Part C, we will use the, anyone? Also the second one, you are correct. So in this case, you just put 1 in here for the second one. So no, don't do the first one, you get wrong, okay? So this is how we do when you have piecewise function. It's not that difficult, okay? Next is just plot it. Next, I would just go on to this more difficult ones here. So this is called the zeros, or the x-intercept. Means they want you to find f of x equals to 0. So you just put 0 in your f of x here, and you try to solve for x in this case. So if you have a fraction, we just multiply 5 on both sides to get rid of the fraction. And 5 times 0 is 0. So in this case, this is 4/3. So this is how we find what we call as a zeros or x-intercept in this case. For question 10, it's a little bit tough because this time you have to perform what we call as factor by groupings. So you just need to, if you are not very good in factoring, you need to brush up your factor here. This is a 4 term, so what I do is I cut this into 2 terms, and then what do I do is I factor the common term. So the first 2, I can take out x squared, I will get x minus 1. And the common factor for the last 2 terms is a -4. The reason why we pick negative is because this term has the beginning of this term has a negative. So I take out the -4 and I will get x minus 1, not x plus 1. It's because when I distribute this, 2 negative become positive. And usually when you do factoring by groups, this parenthesis, the terms inside there must be exactly the same. Same number, same sign, same x, everything the same. If you find these 2 parentheses are different, something is wrong. Okay, this is usually not the same. Since these 2 terms are the same, you can factor it because they are common factors. And then what you left is x squared minus 4. This leftovers. And x squared minus 4 is a perfect square because they are perfect square. So we do the difference. We can do what we call as the sum and difference of perfect square. X plus 2 and x minus 2 because 4 is a perfect square of 2. So this is how we factor this by groupings, and then you make them all equal to 0. So in this case, you get 1 here, -2, and 2 when you solve. So this is how you find what we call as zeros, x-intercept, or sometimes we call it fx equals to 0. Okay, you will see this in your online homework, so make sure you guys know how to do some factors here. If you are still weak on factorings, I will recommend you to practice. Usually go to Khan Academy. They should have, you just type Khan Academy, and then you go in and then you type factoring math, and they will give you can practice on it. 11 is asking us to figure out what is f of x, what is the value when f of x equals to g of x. So what we do here is we given us 2 functions here, we just make them equal. So once you make them equal, like x squared plus 2x plus 2y equals to 7x minus 5, we begin to make this equal to 0 because this is a quadratic. Quadratic means you have power 2. So I will subtract 7x and plus 5, and then I will get x squared minus 5x plus 6. And again, you have to factor here. Okay, so how do we factor a three terms trinomial, we call it? We just take 6 here, and we know 6 is 3 times 2, and we need to get a -5 when you add them, so I put negative. So this is what we call as an easy trinomial factors. It's because your leading coefficient here is 1. Okay, so if your leading coefficient is 1x squared or x squared, then you can do this. So when you multiply these two, you get a +6. And when you add these two, you will get a -5. If your leading coefficient is not 1, it's 2, 3, or 4, then you have to do the grouping part. So you have to kind of brush up your factoring here if you need help. And then you have to make this equals to 0. So that's why x in this case is 3, and x in this case is 2. Okay. Next, domain case. Any polynomial functions, your domain is always all real numbers. What is polynomial functions? Polynomial functions is like 1 over 2x squared, x squared plus 2x plus 1, 7x minus 5, x cubed minus x squared minus 4x plus 4. So if I ask you what is the domain of all this function, this polynomial function or this polynomial function, your domain is going to be all real numbers. So you do not need to do any work. All real numbers means everything negative to positive infinity. Okay. For question 13, your domain here, because this is a fraction. So when you have a fraction, your domain says denominator cannot be 0. So in this case, we make this equals to 0. So we say all real numbers except -5, because that will make him 0. For square root, then you take the radicand y minus 10, make it equals or greater than or equals to 0. So you take all this and make it equals and solve for y, and in this case, y is greater than or equals to 10. So either you can give me your answer like this, or you give to me from 10 to infinity. That is the domain for this case. For 15, this is a very special case because now you have a fraction and a square root in the denominator. So if you have a fraction plus square root in the denominator, then you take whatever you have in the denominator and make it equals greater than 0. So you cannot make it greater than or equals to 0 like what we did in 14. The reason why is because 0 is no good in the denominator. Okay, denominator cannot be 0. So in this case, you can only take all this number that is positive only, cannot be negative, cannot be 0. So this one means it cannot be negative and 0. Okay, so if you have a square root in there, means that you cannot be negative and 0 in this case. So we all be positive. And when you solve this, you will get x is greater than 4 in this case. So that's why it's 4 to infinity. And you can tell the difference here is this one we use bracket, means we include 10. This one we use parentheses, means we do not include 4. You guys doing all right here so far with this? Anyone have questions? Okay. We have an open box with a volume is 24 centimeter. Open box has made from a square piece of material of 24 centimeter on the side, cutting equal squares. So what happened is that you will have a box. Can't draw a box here. Imagine this is a box. Okay. So so you have to use imagination here. I cannot draw a box here. So you have a box, and this box is 24. It's a square, so it's a 24 by 24. So imagine you have a box here. It's 24, 24, and you on the corner you take out those boxes corners here. So when you fold that up, your 24 here will be subtract 2x. The reason why it subtract 2x is because you got x on both sides. So when you tear it out, you have to deduct the 2x. This is for the top part. The bottom, the width part also you have to subtract 2x is because you're taking x, another x on the top and the bottom part. So that means that once you take it and fold it up, your length, this is your length, this is your length, and this is your width. And then when you fold it up, you will get what we call as your height. And your height in this case will be x because it's a x inches tall. Okay. So what happened is that the volume for the box is length times width times height. So length is 24 minus 2x, width is 24 minus 2x, and height is x. So what you do is you just multiply this up. Since these are the same, so I just do 24 minus 2x squared times x. And then this is the volume. And then the question is asking what is the domain for this. And how do you find the domain is you take this 24 minus 2x and you solve for x. You make that equal to 0 and you solve for x, and x in this case is 12. And your domain in this case is between 0 and 12 with parentheses in this case. Okay. So mostly when you have this part, the word problem part, this is something that you have to think about it. Mostly some students might have a little bit difficulties here. We'll do the last question, 19 here. No, we have a few more questions. This is about revenue, cost, and profit. So this is for business major. So a company produce a variable cost for $12.30 per unit and a fixed cost of $98,000. So this is your cost. So in this case, we want to write C as a cost. So CX is 12.30x. This 12.30 come from here, how many it is, plus 98,000. This is your fixed cost. So this is what we call as a changeable term or variable term because it's changed based on how many units you produce. And this one is fixed. Okay. And the product sells for $17.98. So that means that that is your revenue. Revenue means your intake, your income, or how much you have, how much you sold. So this is, so it's 17.98x. So this is for part B. And then for part C, they ask you for profit. So profit is you take the revenue minus the cost. So you take this 17.98x minus the cost. But when you minus, you have to have a parenthesis here because you have to distribute, the negative has to be distributed. So this, and then once you distribute and combine like term, this is your profit in this case. Okay. So this is how we do the cost, the revenue, and profit. So make sure you guys know this because especially business major, you'll be used a lot on this one. And the last two one is a bit difficult. This is what we call as difference of quotient. This is the one that is very tough. And I will tell you right now, it's going to be come up in your test. Just want to point out to you, I'm going to tell you right now, question 20 is coming out in the test. And it's not going to be exactly the same as question 20, but it's kind of the variation of it. So when you do your online homework, make sure you emphasize on it. So how do we do question number 20 to find the difference of quotient? The first thing you need to do is figure out what is fx plus h. And so what is fx plus h is you change all the x to become x plus h. So the original equation, say, is 4x squared minus 2x, right? This is the original equation. So what do I do is I change all this capital X to become x plus h. Okay, so this is fx plus h here. So we change all the x to become x plus h. And then what you need to do next is you have to FOIL x plus h, which is the same thing as x plus h squared. So make sure you guys know how to FOIL this out. So when you FOIL, you will get x squared plus 2xh plus h squared. So when you FOIL this, you will find out that you got 2xh's and then x squared h squared. And then if you notice, you have a 4 in front. So that means you have to multiply this whole thing by 4. So you have to distribute your 4. So actually this fx of h give you 4x squared plus 8xh plus 4h squared. This is just doing him, fx plus h. It's a lot of work. Next, you have to do the negative f of x. What's the meaning of negative f of x is you take this f of x and you negate. And what's the meaning of the negation? Means change all your sign. So the 4x squared is a positive 4x squared. It becomes negative 4x squared. The negative 2x will become a positive 2x. Okay. So what is the difference of quotient says? The difference of quotient says that you take this. I'm going to copy and paste. And you take this and you add them together. And then you divide this by h. And what do you find out is you find out that the 4x squared is being canceled because you got both sides. And what else is canceled? You also notice that where is my, oh my goodness, I make a mistake because this is just for this. Still have more. So for the fx partial h is just for this, and then you still need to distribute the negative 2 to it. So this one has a negative 2x minus 2h. Sorry about that. Yep. So you still need to distribute that follow up. So you still have a negative 2x plus 2h over here. Copy and paste, and then copy and paste that. And you also notice that your 2x will be canceled. So you notice that there is a lot of cancellation. If you find out that there's no cancellation in here, something is wrong. What you notice when you cancel all this out is you end up with all the h's. You got h here, and h there. So you can factor the h out. So once you factor the h out, you will get 8x on the first one. You got 4h on the second one. And then you got minus 2 on the last one because you take the h, and h on each case. And this is all over h. And the h over h you can cancel. So this is why I say this is super difficult. And in calculus, we call this differentiation. So what you left is your answer, 8x plus 4h minus 2. So that's why this is your answer in this case, 8x plus 4h minus 2. So I would recommend you guys to practice this because this is something that is very important, okay? All right, now I'm taking attendance. So I want you guys to go ahead and type in present for me. Those who retype it early on, can you retype it again? So so everyone please, yep, go ahead, type present, private, whatever you want, you can type. Yep, that is your attendance. So please make sure your name, CL Shell, okay, I got you, CL Shell. So make sure that yeah, okay, thank you, yep, Shanna, yeah. So make sure if I don't know your name, I think I know everyone's name here, so yeah. Okay, go ahead and type in present. So this is 2.2 that what we are doing here. So we will continue with 2.3. Okay, yep, thank you, I got you, yep. Yep, if your name is spelled a little bit different, yep, make sure you type it down like what Nancy did, Nancy present, so I know it's you. Yep, go ahead, you got like 15 minutes to do so. Okay, so next we have is this question. This is 2.3, analyzing graph and function. So this graph, we talk about what is a vertical line test. This is to test if a graph is a function or not. And then 0 is where we put fx equals to 0. You solve for x. We did this on the previous section where we set the whole equation equals to 0, like factoring. And then we have increase, decrease, and constant. Increase means that if you look at the graph goes up. This is called the increasing. If your graph goes down, when you read left to right, it's decreasing. Constant is gonna be stay on the flat constant. And every time when you do increasing, decreasing, or constant, we always talk about the domain. And what is the domain? The domain is all the x values. Okay, so we only talk about the domain here. So let's say this is 2, And let's say this is 6. So in this case, the decreasing part in this case will go from negative infinity to 2. So for decreasing part is negative infinity 2 because from the domain, let me just move the x somewhere else here. There you go. It goes from the dome is going down from negative 2. The constant will be go from 2 to 6. If you have a question like this, and for increasing is 6 to infinity. So this is how you figure out increasing, decreasing constant. We always use the x, the domain, and you always also use parentheses. So I know sometimes you see a bracket, but this time we always, so for the increasing, decreasing constant, we always use parentheses. So we never use brackets in this case. Relative maxima and relative minima. Relative minima means it's a turning point, and the turning point is on the lower case. Relative maxima means it's a turning point, it's on the maximum case. So if I give you a graph like this, these 2 points is called relative maxima, and this point is called relative minima. It has to be a turning point. So make sure you guys know that the relative maxima and minima must be a turning point. Okay, it can be plural, so it can be more than one. Even and odd functions. If you have an even functions, an even function is where the domain is when you replace negative x, you get back f of x. For odd functions, when you replace negative x, you will get negative f of x. Okay, we'll talk more about this even and odd functions, giving you some examples. Okay, so first thing is this example telling us to figure out what is the domain and range of this graph. So some students doesn't know how to figure out domain, or how you figure out domain in this class, in the graph. So for domain, I always tell students is how far left and right the graph can go. Okay, I always tell students that domain, how far left and right the graph can go. Range, how far down and up it can go. So this is the domain and range I always tell students. So if I give you this this question here, how do you figure out your domain? You figure out how far left this graph goes. Because of this arrow means it keep on going left and left, so it goes to negative infinity. How far right does it go? This graph is also keep going to the right and keep going to infinity, so it's infinity. The reason why I say left and right, not right and left, is because when you write in the interval notation, you have to start from the low to the high. So we do the left and then the right. And then for range, how far down and up? So for me, this graph since is going all the way down to negative infinity. So that's how far down it goes. How far up it goes up to this point, and that point is 3 and it's including. So this is the range in this case. So this is how you figure out the domain and range in this case. And then if a question asks you to find what is f of -1, you just look at your x value. So forget, this is your x value, and you have to figure out what is your y value for that case. So x of -1 is right on here, and the y value in this case is 3. Oh, -1, sorry. -1 is here. Sorry, I read 1. -1 is here, sorry, and my y value is -1. So that means that when f is -1, it's -1. For this case, x is 0. X is 0 is this case. When x is exactly 0, y in this case will be 2. So this is not too difficult when you how you read graph using f of 3, f of 1, and so on. Okay. Vertical line test is easy. You draw the vertical line test. So like this question 2, if you draw a vertical line test, the vertical line test, the vertical line test crosses 2 points. So this is not a function. When you draw, for question 3, when you draw a vertical line test, you only cross at one point. So this is a function in this case. Yes, those who are still, make sure you type in present for your attendance. Those who are not yet. The next question asking you to find the zeros. So how do you find the zeros is you set the f of x equals to 0. This is how you figure out zeros. So you put 0 over here, and then what you do is, in this case, you have to factor. So this factor is a hard factor because it's no longer a 1. This is a 3 trinomial. So you take what we call is factoring by AC method. So you know the AC method. So 3 times negative 16 is negative 48. And then you have to find what times what is negative 48. But when you add it, you get 22. So 24 and 2 will work. Positive 24 and negative 2 to be precise. Because when you add these two numbers, you get negative 22, positive 22. And when you multiply these two numbers, you get negative 48. So this 24 and negative 2 will break this 22x into two terms. So this 22x is positive 24 minus 2x. And now you got the 4 terms. So you do groupings. You cut this by half. Common factor here is 3x. You get x plus 8. Common factor here is negative 2. You got x plus 8. And then you fact that same factor, x plus 8, as I told you early on. And then you got 3x minus 2, and you get x minus 8 and 2/3. Another way for you guys to do this, if you do not like to factor, is to use the quadratic formula, which is given down here. Negative b plus minus b squared minus 4ac over by 2a. So there are 2 ways for you guys to do this kind of work. If you do not like factoring, you can use quadratic formula. Your answer is still going to be the same. So this is how we usually factor it. So no, you do not need to show both ways. You only need to show one way in your test. Don't waste your time. Okay, only one way to. Don't do 2 ways. Up to you which way you are comfortable with. Quadratic formula or factoring. I want to tell you, not everything can be factored. Okay, only do one way. Okay, the rest is pretty much the same. So you just put it 0 and you try to solve it. It's not too much. Next thing is figure out what is the increasing, decreasing, and constant. So question 7 here, this one is decreasing. So do not look at the arrows. Make sure you read this left to right. So when you read this left to right, this one is decreasing. And when you look at left to right, this one is also decreasing. So this entire graph is decreasing. It never increased. It never constant. So it decreased from negative infinity to 1. And you find out that this one is what we call as your asymptotes. You will learn that in chapter 4. This graph will never cross over there. And then it goes from 1 to infinity. So this graph is having only decreasing case here. Okay. This is the graph that we have. So this is an increasing. And then from negative 1 going down, this is decreasing. And then this is increasing. And then this is constant. So we got 2 parts increasing, 1 part decreasing, and 1 constant. So the increasing goes from negative infinity to negative 1. And then it goes from 0 to 2. I want to point out that it's a correction here. This is supposed to be a parenthesis. Everything that you do here is supposed to be parenthesis, no brackets. So I want to point out to you, do not use brackets here. Okay. Okay. Always use parentheses. So so this is negative into negative 1, and then from 0 to 2, that is increasing. Decreasing is from negative 1 to 0. This is a tiny part that is decreasing. So again, no, do not use parentheses. Okay, let me put a note here. You do not use bracket.
Even if it's greater than or equal to.
Yes.
Still want to
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Only use parentheses. Okay.
And also for number 5, when you factor the solution, why did you cross out 4x?
Because I multiply 4x on both sides.
I got you. Okay.
Yep, I multiply 4x on both sides, so the 4x is cancel out, and 0 times
subtracted
4x is still
okay.
0. Right, and then the constant part is from 2 to infinity. So Again, class, this when you talk about increase, decrease constant, make sure that you use only use parentheses here. Okay. Slope, I think you guys managed to find this. This is not too difficult, a slope case. Same thing, this is slope. Now we do the last part, even and odd. Yep, and then we go. So in order for us to find even functions, you plug negative x, you get back the original function. If it's odd, you plug negative x, you get what we call as the negation function. Means that all your sign is changed, then it is odd. Neither means it's not one of those. So like question 11, how do we know if this is even, odd, or neither? I plug in x to become negative x. So this x will become negative x to the power of 6. This x will become negative x squared. So since this is a power 6, so it's x6 because it's a positive. This is x squared because it's also even. It's also positive, but positive times negative, you get negative 2x squared plus 3. So you find out that these two functions is exactly the same thing as f of x. So if you plot negative x and you still get back f of x, then this is even. Okay. Next, for question 12, you plot negative x. So you put negative x on the axis here. So you got negative x square of negative x plus 5. This is not the same as f of x, because f of x doesn't have negative on it. And this is also not the same as negative f of x. The reason why this is not the same as negative f of x is because of your square root here. So the outside is good, it has a negative, but inside, this is x, this is negative x. So this is no f of x, no negative f of x. That's why this is neither. Okay. To be odd, odd will look something like this, where you put negative x in here, you will get negative x and a negative x squared. So this will become negative x. When you square this, you still get x squared. You find out that this is exactly the same as the negation of f of x. So negative f of x. So if you put a negative in front, you get exactly the same this. So this is an odd function in this case. Okay. So this is usually how we figure out even, odd, or neither. You plug in x to become negative x and see if you have a negative on those two. Okay, so your homework for this Monday is gonna be 2-1, 2-2, and 2-3. Okay. Question 5, we remove 4x is because I multiply 4x on both sides, Elijah. Yep, I multiply 4x on both sides. These two will cancel. So 0 times 4x, you get 0. Do we need to bracket less than or equal? Or equal? Usually we use brackets, Harry. We always use brackets, but because we only just use parentheses when you have a domain for increase, when you're asking for increasing, decreasing, and constant. This is the only time that you only use parentheses here. Okay, but if I ask you for domain and range, then you will either use parentheses or brackets. Okay, so if a question is asking just the domain or range, then you will have to use either parentheses or brackets. Okay, so that's how we do it. But just for the increasing, decreasing constant, or parentheses, just only for just this case. Okay, all right. So don't forget your online homework that is due on Monday by midnight will be 2.1 till 2.4. Now I did not go through 2.4. But I will do 2.4 on Monday. 2.4, I think I only have like 10 or 12 questions in there. So it's a very, it's very like it's easy, 2.4. So, but I recommend you guys to start. There are 4 homework questions due on this coming Monday by midnight. So make sure you guys do those. So that's the end for today's class. When we come to class on Monday, I will just do a little bit of 2.4. It's just graphing the graphs, just basic graphs. So it's pretty much very easy. So you can look at my notes in D2L. I will post all these red ink note in D2L so you guys know what do we talk about. So anyone have any questions? How can I buy a correct access code? I do. Hannah, I just buy it from bookstore. I do not know how to buy. Make sure the access code is called, it is for math. and it's for it's for this class. I would finding an access code in Amazon. Good luck with that. And it must be not used, Hannah. It must be something that is just, you know, not used. So I would recommend do not buy it in the, yeah, buy it on the website, buy it on the web assigned website. Yeah, don't buy it from the Amazon because it's tricky. If someone use that, or go to the bookstore, yes, go to the bookstore because it's good. Don't buy Amazon because someone used the access code is no longer being good. Okay. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna stop this recording here.